Here's another example from radar taken from the sky in this case, and looking at, say, the places where earthquakes occur, and the synthetic aperture radar is used to identify landscape changes from seismic activity and particular small movements that happen when, of course, there is an earthquake or a foreshock. And this data is taken by planes and satellites, processed, and then stored. At the moment, they're just starting to store it on the cloud. They have about 150 terabytes, and they're hoping to get a new radar mission that would actually get a lot more data, because, for instance, the analysis of the earthquake in Haiti was limited by the fact that they had very little UAVSAR data of the Haiti region. So it's important to gather more data to be able to understand better when earthquakes could occur, and then take the steps necessary to mitigate the consequences. Here's an example of an image which is interferograms for various couple of flight lines, actually 3 flight lines in the 2010 period, and various interesting effects can be seen. This is in Southern California, and there's also data is supplemented by GPS, which are these dots, and so the GPS is linked to the UAVSAR for a study of the earthquake, the seismic activity. Okay, here's an example of which I alluded to earlier, where IRODS, the DataNet technology, is being used, and this is being used to basically make it much easier for climate researchers and weather forecasts and the related instrument teams and scientists to be able to understand what we have and what we need. Currently, it's very difficult for scientists to actually analyze data because there's so much, and it's not very well annotated as to with metadata to tell you what's in it. And this includes not just instrumental data, but simulations. This IRODS will cope with the replication, which will be done for both performance and reliability. And it has some data which we discussed in the next project, MERA, a series which is the Clouds and Earth Radiant Energy System, and these are all, and which is around, which is not so much data, just less than a gigabyte. MERA is actually a pretty big data system, and this is just the way things will be done in the future, with metadata, labeling, simulations, and observational data supporting scientific discovery. So MERA is a project in NASA which is basically linking together the large simulations with the data, and it's used for climate change. MapReduce is the technology which is used to do the integration. The simulations, of course, are done with totally different technologies. It's running on a 36-node InfiniBand cluster. There's 480 terabytes, and it's growing by a terabyte a month. And this, like some of the other simulations, has parallelism over the observational data and parallelism over the simulation. The simulations, of course, will run not with HPC supercomputers. So this involves data assimilation, which we mentioned already, and it combines, which is an idea that is pretty important. Normally you learn in class that when you do a simulation, which involves, say, a partial differential equation, you need some boundary conditions and some initial conditions. And that's enough to specify the system. Well, that's true if you knew everything about the system. But in the case of atmospheric simulations, the equations may be known, but the composition of the atmosphere is not known exactly. And so the simulations are intrinsically inaccurate. And so the idea is you would use a different approach. You use initial conditions, boundary conditions, and data inside the region being simulated, and effectively merge the measured data with the simulated data to effectively enhance the validity of the simulation. And this is a very clever, important idea. This has been used in weather and climate work for a long time, and it's a generally important idea. We need to. It's an idea which underlies all of big data. We have lots of sources of data. We need to basically do giant least squares fits, combining all sources of data to get the best possible result. And it's not obviously not least squares fits. Sometimes it's sophisticated machine learning. But in the case of data assimilation, they typically are done by equivalent of chi-squared style least squares fit to do the combination. It uses things called Kalman filters, which are involved in this type of work. Here's an interesting application from NASA, which is looking at the simulations and comparing it with instrumental data and trying to understand turbulence, which so it's effectively looking for anomalies. So you have and these anomalies represent things that might cause trouble for aircraft, and so it's the idea is that this is, so remember we looked at the Catalina case where we were doing event discovery. Well, here we're doing event discovery not in terms of changing stars and changing supernovas and black holes and things. Here, what's changing is the atmosphere, and where that change is alarming or abnormal, you want to institute a signal which goes out for further study and maybe warns the pilots away from that region and so on. So this is again in the same data size as before, 500 terabytes, half a petabyte, and this is the type of image that you might be looking at, with turbulent waves seen in the image. And you have to do the machine learning image processing to find these turbulence automatically, of course. So here's another data assimilation example done in a sort of high end that pointing out that in 2017, the simulations of the so-called Earth Systems Grid, which coordinates all this climate science work, is going to produce 30 petabytes just at Lawrence Berkeley Lab. And of course, as this is going on around the world, because weather and climate are critical scientific areas of study, the amount of data coming out of this must be in the orders of hundreds of petabytes even per year from these simulations of climate. So this is written from the point of view of the climate simulator. Previous slides were more from the observational point, but they all point out that we need to assimilate and integrate them, and to be able to store the data in a way that can be easily accessed and understood for later scientific discovery. Remember, this is a feature of the world. We're taking data, whether it be from simulations or instruments, and we saw that in astronomy, how that taken data is compared with new data to produce the transients. And the only way you can find the transients is that you've already stored all the old data. So it's essential to store the old data. Here we have an application which is sort of more at the beginning stage, but it's an important idea that that you want to be able to do environmental studies, in particular of watersheds, which involves simulations, but which has also linked from not just the macroscopic level of the amount of water or flooding or earth studies, but you need to look at the genomic structure of what's going on in terms of the so-called microbiome, the actual study of the genomes which are living in the environmental infrastructure. And then you need to study how those are related together and how they affect both the functioning of the microbiome and also the whole watershed. And so again, this is a data assimilation project where you have simulations and data, We already discussed how the metagenomic type analysis of the environmental genomic data is an enormous computational task. So this is here they're tuning up to be able to do this type of rich multidisciplinary analysis. This is going on today. Meriflux and FluxNet are respectively the US and world collection of sensors of trace gases, carbon dioxide, water vapor, across time and space, and they allow you to feed these into ecosystem studies and environmental science studies, which again feed into climate change and other areas. We have standard software like EdiPro, custom analysis software, statistics from R being the statistics package, neural nets, MATLAB, again, another field which uses MATLAB. There are around 150 TARs in Meriflex and 500 TARs globally. And here's some typical pictures of the data gathering. And obviously one needs, there's huge numbers of examples like this. I mean, the most common sensor, of course, is the smartphone. There are billions of those, and there are only 500 of these, but these are, of course, somewhat bigger than smartphones. But the idea is the same. You have things gathering data, whether it be Facebook, whether it be tweets or Facebook tappings in, or whether there be measurements of gases, gas densities, and contaminants in the environment. Those sensor data need to be gathered, sent back to some cloud infrastructure and analyzed, and then whether we're discovering again communities or about the health of the environment, that's going to come from the integration of these this data from lots of sensors in the cloud. Here is a map of the FluxNet networks with which I gather has 960 site years of data from 253 measurement sites.